Hi everyone and welcome to what would be the first of a series of devlogs all about my game Mimic. And welcome to episode 1 where we're going to talk a little bit about my Mimic character, and I want to do a devlog that's a little bit different and a little bit more educational and basically share a few things that I had to solve and how I solved them, give you a bit more insight behind the scenes of my game, and so you get to see kind of things that we're working with as an indie developer. So let's get started taking a look at our Mimic character. One of the issues we have when dealing with the Mimic character is that they are a creature that runs around on all fours. And this presents its own unique little problems, such as when you're doing a character, the capsule component can't be lengthways, it has to be vertical. And so you have this issue where the character's collision is actually only on this capsule that you may see here, but the character actually extends a bit further than that. This leads to some issues like clipping, where the character is like trying to walk up a slope, their arms are clipping through the floor, things like that. To solve something like that, we need to use something like a control rig. However, this also presented some issues as well we had to get past. Let me explain. So if I were to look at the control rig of our finished Mimic here, if I just go up here and just search for control rig, see I've done a few different copies of this to try and get right. And eventually settled on this solution, and I explained why we had to do different versions. So as you can see, the default pose for the character is a bit broken in this example, but as you see, the default pose for the character is a A pose character, okay? But the character is predominantly on all fours, so a lot of animation has been designed around it starting off as a pose character, then going into that all fours character pose. So very different setup. We can't just do basic IK that we would have done on, say, like a normal character. So this had to be done slightly differently, and as you can see, it looks a bit broken when he's standing up, and that's because that's not his default standing pose. His default standing pose is actually handled over here. So if I go to preview and change this to use specific animation instead, and I just search for his idle pose, which I believe is this one. Yep, you can see he's now looking a bit more accurate. So the solution around we tried different methods and eventually settled on a solution. At the start of the solve is we copy all the bone data over to temporary files and temporary assets, basically. So if you have a look here, at the start here, I'm copying all the bones. So I've got a list of all the bones I want to copy, and I'm setting temporary bones on my rig hierarchy. So if I go to my rig hierarchy, you can see there's temporary bones. These are just empty bones that don't do anything. They're there just to be set the location and rotation of them at the start of the solve. Okay, so that they've got a copy of where the original starting point was. Because the issue you have with a control rig is you're usually referring to the initial pose of a bone. But the initial pose of the bone in this case would be in its A pose, which isn't correct. We want it to be more in its four-legged version. So that's why we had to do this temporary bone sort of solution. Once I copied the bones over, I then went through the normal IK process of getting the bone, doing a sphere trace down from each position, and storing that value as a variable on the control rig. And so each hand and each foot is doing this to store a height, basically, of the left hand, left foot, right hand, right foot. And here we've got this aim going on, and this aim is handling the rotation of the bone of the hand and feet as well, so they align with like the normal of the floor. As you can see here, I'm using the normal of the floor to get that alignment correct. Okay, so as I reach inclines, it will adjust for that. And as you can see, I've done that 4 times, one for each limb. Once we've done that, then comes the pelvis part, and the pelvis is a little bit different because again we've got 4 limbs here. But the pelvis, we want to change the height of based upon the feet and whereabouts they are, because they're more in line with the feet. Even though this one's a bit further back, it's more in line with the feet. So if I were to adjust the feet, I want the hip and pelvis to accommodate that change of height. To help show this, I've built in a debug function. And if I turn this on, which it already is, excellent. If I click and grab these things here, I just change it to world, I can grab the bones down. If I drag it down lower, as you can see, it's going to make that adjustment in the pelvis according to that. Okay, which is correct. That's what we want. Okay. Now, the hands aren't doing that because they're not near the pelvis, but that was what's going on over here. We're taking the pelvis bone and moving it based upon which one is basically a lower one down, and matching it to be like sort of in the middle between the two. And after we do that, we then go through all the bones. We take the temporary bones that we got here, so we've got a reference of where they were, and then moving the actual bones to a new location based upon that location plus that height difference that's being made by the IK. And what that gets us is the wrong one. If I grab the IK controls, I can move and lower the body. Now you can also hear the neck and head are also lowering, and they're part of this full IK node over here too. If I go down, there's the head. Okay, and then the neck is somewhere up here. There you go. Okay, so we're adjusting that. Now, immediately, we didn't have these accumulate lerps on here. It was just adding the values straight onto it. But what that meant was that, yes, it was like immediate response. But because it's immediate response, it gave this idea of the arms sort of snapping into place when testing on the full map. So what I did was I put these accumulate lerps on here. And what this basically does, it just lerps the value. So as you can see, it sort of lags behind a little bit, giving us a much smoother movement of the character when they're climbing around the level. And finally over here, we are handling full rotation of the hands. We're just adding a little bit of rotation to the hands here, just to accommodate for a slight difference in how they're working, really. So we grab each of the bones and we just tell them to rotate around based upon their temporary bone. Okay, that's what they're doing. So this handles the location and put on rotation, and then this is changing which ones are rotating specifically, like the hands and feet. Okay, and that's basically it. Okay, so it took a few variations to get this to where we wanted to go, but we end up with something really quite nice. So if I go and test this out, so as he approaches inclines and declines, you can see how the body is sort of like matching to rotate. Yeah, which is what you want. And it also leads to interesting behavior too when you get off to the edges here. They go down like that. So that accumulate needs to go a little bit faster, it looks like. So we'll make that a little bit faster there, I think. So there you go. I've updated the lerp to be about 50 now, and it's a lot faster getting into its right position. And here I'm just testing it on different inclines to see how it responds to those different inclines that are going on. So it's not perfect. There's a long way to go with that, and I still want to do a few extra features on it to get it more accurate, really, to the surrounding floors. But what's really important now is testing it in the actual levels of the game to see how it responds to actual geometry, and making it work, make sure it works for all that stuff too. So one of the more popular animations people really liked from seeing the demo and the trailer is when the mimic bursts out the back of the characters, of the player character. So I'm going to show you how it's done for those who are curious. We've got the animation over here, and as you can see, okay, so it comes in two parts. We've got the victim animation and we've got the mimic animation. And basically what it's doing is we have all the bones scaled down to a single point, and then they scale up and burst out at the same time. Okay, so this was actually handled by a friend of mine who's an expert animator, Luke Bridger. He does a lot of animation for film and TV, and he happily done this for me as a little side experiment. And as you can see, the effect of this is really great. Okay, so to couple this with the animation of the victim, you get some really nice marriage between the two. All that's left to do really is to up the gore factor and effects factor to sort of hide the connection between the two. Now, there's lots of really cool things I'd like to do with this. It's just I don't have the resources or knowledge or know-how to actually achieve it. For example, there's a really cool effect in Dead Space, especially the remake, where you see a character transform into a necromorph live right in front of you. And that's a great effect and something I really wish I could had to this game, but it's just something outside our wheelhouse. So we're making do what we can and trying to see if we can find a way to sort of splice and also hide the transition effects that are going on there. So it's going to be a lot of Niagara effects going into a bit of tweaking, adjusting. I had the idea of making like skin flaps and things like that and other gory bits. But it's going to take some experimentation. We'll see where we end up with that, maybe in a later devlog video. So there you go. Hopefully you enjoyed this devlog video, a little insight into the game. You can check out Mimic on Steam and PlayStation 5 right now if I'm wishlist it. Please do, it really does help out a lot. And make sure you subscribe to the channel to see more from Mimic and other videos as well from the channel. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.